The piercing cry shattered the peaceful morning like glass breaking on concrete. It wasn't the familiar sound of a bird calling to its mate or the playful chatter of squirrels. This was different. This was a sound of pure distress, a heart-wrenching plea that seemed to echo through every corner of the ancient woods. The sound carried with it the unmistakable weight of desperation, a call that would touch the hearts of all who heard it. Max, a 4-year-old golden Labrador with intelligent amber eyes and a coat that shimmered like polished copper in the morning light, was the first to react. His ears perked up immediately, swiveling toward the source of the distress call. He had been enjoying his morning walk with his owner, Michael Thompson, along their usual trail that skirted the edge of Willow Creek Forest. Michael, a retired high school teacher with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, when he smiled, had been lost in thought about his morning coffee and newspaper routine when he felt the sudden tension in Max's leash.
The change in Max's demeanor was instant and dramatic. His posture became rigid with alertness, his tail straight and pointing like a compass needle. The morning's peaceful routine shattered as Max's instincts took over.
Warning! He lunged forward with such force that the leash slipped from Michael's surprised grasp, the blue nylon material snaking through the air as Max bolted toward the source of the cry. "Max, come back!" Michael's voice carried through the crisp morning air, but Max was already disappearing into the undergrowth, his golden coat flashing between the trees like sunlight on water. For a moment, Michael stood frozen, his heart racing. With sudden anxiety, Max had never ignored his commands before. The dog's unusual behavior sent a chill of worry down his spine. Muttering under his breath about stubborn dogs and their inconvenient timing, Michael began to follow the path Max had torn through the underbrush. His comfortable walking shoes weren't meant for this kind of terrain, and every step brought the crunch of dried leaves and the snap of fallen twigs beneath his feet. The forest seemed to close in around him, the familiar trail disappearing as he ventured deeper into unknown territory. The sound of Max's barking drew him forward, urgent and insistent. It wasn't his usual playful bark or even his alert bark when the mailman approached. This was different, a sound that carried with it a message of urgency and purpose. Michael quickened his pace, his breath coming in short puffs as he pushed through branches and ducked under low-hanging limbs. When he finally broke through, into a small clearing, the scene before him stopped him dead in his tracks. There, caught in the cruel embrace of rusty barbed wire, was a young white-tailed deer. Its elegant form was twisted in desperate attempts to free itself, each movement causing the barbarous metal to dig deeper into its flesh. Blood matted its brown coat where the wire bit into its skin, and its large dark eyes were wide with terror and exhaustion. Max stood nearby, his posture protective rather than predatory. He moved in careful circles around the trapped deer, letting out occasional soft whines while keeping his distance, close enough to offer comfort, but far enough not to cause additional fear. The intelligence and empathy in his behavior struck Michael deeply. This wasn't just animal instinct. This was something more profound, a demonstration of pure compassion that transcended species. The deer's chest heaved with panicked breaths, but remarkably, it seemed to understand on some level that Max wasn't a threat. Perhaps it was the gentle nature of Max's movements, or maybe it was simply too exhausted to maintain its fear. But there was an unlikely calm between the two animals that Michael had never witnessed before. "Oh, good Lord," Michael breathed, taking in the severity of the situation. The barbed wire appeared to be part of an old fence, long forgotten and mostly reclaimed by the forest. The deer must have tried to jump over it, becoming entangled in the process. Now it was trapped in a web of rusted metal, each struggle only making its situation worse. Michael's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The deer needed help, that much was clear. But he knew approaching a wild animal, especially one in distress, could be dangerous. He needed tools, help, and expertise he didn't possess. Pulling out his phone, he was relieved to see he still had signal this deep in the woods. Michael's fingers trembled slightly as he scrolled through his contacts, finally landing on the name he needed: Sarah Mitchell, the local wildlife rehabilitator. He'd met her at a community meeting last spring, never imagining he'd need her expertise so urgently. As he pressed the call button, Max settled himself on the ground near the deer, his gentle presence seeming to calm the frightened animal. "Sarah, this is Michael Thompson. I've got an emergency situation with a deer trapped in barbed wire out in Willow Creek Forest. My dog Max found it, and it's in pretty bad shape." Sarah's response was swift and professional. "I'm on my way. Can you send me your location? And Michael, don't try to free it yourself. Those wires can be treacherous, and a panicked deer can be dangerous." While waiting for Sarah, Michael observed the remarkable dynamic between Max and the deer. His loyal companion hadn't moved from his protective position, occasionally letting out soft, reassuring whines when the deer showed signs of renewed panic. The morning sun had risen higher now, casting longer shadows through the trees and warming the clearing. A gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of wildflowers mixed with the metallic tang of blood, a jarring reminder of the deer's predicament. 20 minutes later, the sound of crunching leaves and breaking twigs announced Sarah's arrival. She emerged into the clearing carrying a large medical kit, her experienced eyes immediately assessing the situation. Sarah was in her mid-40s, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the confident movements of someone who'd handled countless wildlife emergencies. "You've got quite a special dog there, Michael," she commented, watching Max's protective behavior. "Most dogs would either frighten the deer more or try to chase it. He seems to understand exactly what's needed." Sarah set down her kit and pulled out thick, protective gloves, wire cutters, and various medical supplies. "The deer's young, probably just over a year old," she observed, slowly approaching the trapped animal. "Female, and despite these injuries, she looks healthy overall. That's good. It means she'll have a better chance at recovery." Working together, Sarah and Michael began the delicate process of freeing the deer. Max remained their steadfast ally, his presence seemingly keeping the deer calmer than either of them could have managed alone. Each snip of the wire cutters brought them closer to freedom, but also carried the risk of spooking the deer or causing additional injury. "Almost there," Sarah murmured, her steady hands working on a particularly stubborn section of wire. "Michael, be ready with that blanket. Once she's free, we'll need to check her wounds before she tries to run." The final strand of wire fell away with a metallic ping that seemed to echo through the clearing. The deer, sensing its newfound freedom, attempted to leap up but stumbled, weakened by exhaustion and blood loss. Max moved closer, positioning himself between the deer and the forest's edge, as if understanding they weren't quite finished helping yet. Sarah worked quickly, cleaning the worst of the wounds with antiseptic and applying a healing salve. "She'll need more treatment," she decided, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling my assistant to bring the transport cage. We'll take her to the rehabilitation center for a proper examination and care." While they waited, Michael found himself sharing the story of Max's morning behavior with Sarah. "I've never seen him act like this," he explained, watching his dog maintain his vigilant position. "It's like he knew exactly what to do, how to help. Makes you wonder how much they understand that we don't give them credit for." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Animals often surprise us with their capacity for empathy. In my years of wildlife rehabilitation, I've seen countless examples of different species helping each other. But this connection between Max and the deer is something special." The sound of an approaching vehicle signaled the arrival of Sarah's assistant, Tom, with the transport equipment. The next phase of the rescue would require careful coordination to move the injured deer without causing additional stress or harm. Max seemed to sense the delicacy of the situation, maintaining his calming presence while the humans worked. As they carefully maneuvered the deer into the transport cage, Michael noticed how the animal's eyes kept returning to Max, as if drawing strength from his steady presence. It was a connection that defied natural instincts, a bridge between wild and domestic that spoke to something deeper than mere animal behavior. "Would you and Max like to follow us to the center?" Sarah asked as they secured the cage in her vehicle. "I have a feeling his presence might help keep her calm during the trip and initial treatment." Michael glanced at Max, who was already heading toward their car with purpose in his step. "I think he's already decided for us," he chuckled, feeling a surge of pride in his four-legged companion. The drive to Wild Heart Wildlife Rehabilitation Center took 20 minutes, following the winding road that skirted the edge of Willow Creek Forest. The morning had fully bloomed now, the autumn sun painting the landscape in rich golds and crimsons. Michael followed Sarah's vehicle, occasionally glancing in his rearview mirror to see Max sitting alertly in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the transport cage visible through Sarah's rear window. The rehabilitation center was a sprawling facility set back from the road, surrounded by carefully maintained natural habitat. Several enclosures of varying sizes dotted the property, each designed to provide recovery space for different types of wildlife. As they pulled up to the main building, Michael could see other staff members already preparing for their arrival. "Welcome to Wild Heart," Sarah said as they parked. "We'll take her straight to the treatment room. Michael, you and Max can come in, but we'll need to maintain a calm environment. Max seems to have a special way with her, and that might be exactly what we need right now." The treatment room was a clean, well-equipped space that balanced medical necessity with comfort for wild animals. The deer was carefully transferred to an examination table, where Sarah and her team could properly assess and treat her injuries. Throughout the process, Max positioned himself where the deer could see him, his calm presence continuing to work its subtle magic. "The wounds are deep in some places," Sarah reported as she worked, "but fortunately, no major blood vessels were damaged. She's going to need time to heal and we'll have to watch for infection, but I'm optimistic about her recovery." As Sarah and her team worked, Michael found himself drawn into conversation with Tom, who shared stories about other remarkable animal encounters they'd witnessed at the center. "Every animal that comes through here has a story," Tom explained. "But it's rare to see such a clear example of cross-species compassion like what your Max showed today. This is something special." The initial treatment took over an hour, during which Max never wavered from his self-appointed role as guardian and comforter. When the deer was finally settled into a recovery enclosure, Sarah turned to Michael with a thoughtful expression. "Would you consider bringing Max back for visits during her recovery? I know it's asking a lot, but I've never seen anything quite like this connection they've formed. It could make a significant difference in her healing process." Michael looked at Max, who was still watching the deer with gentle attention, and felt something shift in his own heart. This morning's unexpected adventure had opened a door to something larger than himself, a chance to be part of something meaningful and extraordinary. "We'd be honored," he replied, reaching down to scratch behind Max's ears. "I think we've both found a new purpose here." As they prepared to leave the center that first day, Michael couldn't help but reflect on how quickly life could change. A simple morning walk had transformed into a rescue mission, which now promised to become something even more significant. He watched as Max took one last look at the deer's enclosure before getting into the car, and knew that their regular morning walks would never be quite the same again. The drive home was quiet, both man and dog lost in their own thoughts. The cry. Events of the morning felt almost dreamlike now, but the reality of their new commitment grounded them. They had become part of a larger story, one that would continue to unfold in the days and weeks to come. That evening, as Michael sat on his back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Max lay at his feet, occasionally lifting his head to gaze in the direction of the rehabilitation center. The day's events had brought an unexpected weight of responsibility, but also a sense of purpose that Michael hadn't realized he'd been missing since his retirement. He pulled out his phone and began researching wildlife rehabilitation and conservation efforts in their area. If they were going to be regular visitors at Wild Heart, he wanted to understand more about the work being done there. As he read, Max's tail thumped steadily against the wooden deck, as if approving of his owner's initiative. The autumn breeze carried the distant sounds of the forest, birds settling in for the night, the rustle of leaves, the occasional call of a whippoorwill. It was the same forest they'd walked past countless times before, but now it felt different, more alive with possibility. They had glimpsed a world where the boundaries between wild and tame, between helper and helped, could blur and reshape themselves into something new and meaningful. As darkness settled over their quiet neighborhood, Michael made a silent promise to both the injured deer and his remarkable dog. This wouldn't be just a one-time rescue. It would be the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one filled with purpose, compassion, and the kind of connection that transcended the ordinary boundaries between species. Max lifted his head and met Michael's eyes, his gaze wise and knowing. In that moment, Michael understood that his loyal companion had known this all along. Sometimes it took a dog's intuition to show humans the way to their better selves.